I'm sure you would agree with me that one could say that there are those individuals in our world who are awakened or are moving in and out of states of awakened states, if you will. They may be in the minority, perhaps, but they exist. And then there are those who are in the world who are not yet there, varying degrees of unawakened, traveling the path, journeying toward that awakening process spiritually. One question that the awakened, I have found, seem to know the answer to, which seems to be able to distinguish between an awakened person from an unawakened person, is this very spiritually sophisticated question. And tell me if you know the answer to this. What is the difference between a monk and a vacuum cleaner? Well, the answer, the awakened know, is that the answer is the monk has no attachments. That's the difference. Okay. So, okay, it's a groaner, I know, but stay with me. Perhaps it can, be of some help to all of us in determining where we are on the path. By asking ourselves, well, am I more like a monk or am I more like a vacuum cleaner? It's interesting, in some of the Eastern spiritual teachings, of course, most of you are familiar that Hinduism and Buddhism and some of the others place an emphasis on the idea that much of the suffering that we experience in life is due to our attachments, that many of us at least start out and are being healed of being in the vacuum cleaner consciousness, if you will. In fact, there are several kinds of attachments that we all can be guilty of in our humanness. Certainly there are attachments to the outer, outer things in relation to what we want, what we cling to, what we identify with that is external to us, how we want our lives to look. And many of us resist change in various form relative to the external, and we want to stay with what is familiar. But in addition to our attachment to physical things and wanting to keep things the same externally in many ways, we also can be attached to things that are of the nature of consciousness. Things like limiting perceptions. Limiting perceptions having to do with elements of life, limiting perceptions about ourselves, various things. We can be attached to emotional responses to various stimuli in our life. We may fall into conditioned patterns and be kind of asleep in our attachment to showing up in a particular way to the same stimuli that happens in our life or our world. We can be attached to a reactionary kind of response to various things. We can always get angry at the same things. We can easily get stressed or become fearful about the similar things, or we can be resentful or jealous and have a jealous streak that runs through us, or all kinds of things that we may be attached to emotionally even, and mental streams, as well as things physically. Jesus, as you know, was a tremendous teacher of spiritual truth, and one of the things that he always made important through all his teachings really was the importance of one's inner life balancing with one's outer life. That yes, we are living in a three-dimensional world, and while you're living in that three-dimensional world and its pull upon you for all of its attachments, it's very, very important that you have an inner world. And even your inner world attachments need to be dealt with and healed. And a lot of his teachings were along those lines. In and among many of the things that he taught and shared was a statement where, on the Sermon on the Mount, where he said, "Agree with thine adversary quickly." Agree with thine adversary quickly. What did he mean by that? Well, interestingly enough, the adversary actually is a word that is in reference to your foes, to your opposition, to your opponents, that which seems to oppose you in life, oppose your happiness, oppose what you want, when you want it, how you want it. Those things that appear up that kind of push your buttons may irk you, irritate you, whatever. And so those can be your adversaries, and you can think of other adversaries perhaps that I'm not necessarily articulating. But A few verses prior to his saying that, a few verses prior to him saying, agree with thine adversary quickly, is where he's talking about anger. And actually he makes a distinction. You know, one of the old commandment is, thou shalt not kill. But I'm going to tell you, there's another dimension. You need to handle your angers, okay, if you're going to be on the path. And so he talks about that. And he says, if anyone is angry with his brother, you know, meaning any other human being, not if you're angry with the brother that's in the household, it's angry with any human being he's talking about. And he's basically saying it is very, very important that you address that and that you reconcile with the person and that you bring it to resolution. That's part of being on the path. That's part of maintaining an inner peace, tranquility, and harmony. And so the example that he gives to stress the importance of the immediacy of not dragging your feet and moving swiftly on this is to say that if a person is even going to the altar and extending a gift and into ritual at that point, and there remembers and realizes that they, you know, have someone that they have an issue with that needs to be healed or dealt with, they are to leave the altar right then and there and go be reconciled with your brother or whoever it is. In other words, tend to it. Don't put it off. And so, you know, it's kind of like, certainly Jesus could write in many articles and books and magazines today. One would be Psychology Today, because he is so spiritually, psychologically astute. And he's, you know, talking about the idea that the importance of not pushing our charges and our feelings and our issues down, not suppressing them, that we actually should not send them into hiding, but we should, and not ignore them, we should not stuff them, but because they basically become a bigger problem. They become stronger. And part of the healing of the planet is the healing of you. Part of the healing of the planet is you taking responsibility for whatever it is that is being felt in you. And the more that you can understand the triggers and disconnect from them, so that once what really sent you off, no longer when it happens as a stimulus in your life, it no longer sends you off, because you have a new understanding about that and what you believed about yourself or about life when this or that happened. You have a positioning now. There's a shift in consciousness that's taken place. And so his add-on, after talking about anger and the importance of it and leaving the altar, his add-on was basically agree with thine adversary quickly. And so it doesn't mean that you always have to agree with, you know, what another person says or does, but it means that you are to agree to notice quickly the feelings that are passing through you that are far removed from peace, harmony, love, acceptance, kindness, patience. Those are out the window, and there's other stuff happening. And to note what that is quickly, whether you're upset or angry or fearful or whatever, when something in life opposes you, whether it is a person or a situation or an organization or the government or whatever that can irritate you. And you can just keep talking and having conversations with others or in your mind over and over and keep getting upset about something. That's not healing the planet. You know, there's a balance that is very, very important relative to what is taking place out there, perhaps having a stand and having a view and maybe having opinions, but also balancing that with your internal life in terms of amount and things there. So notice quickly those feelings that are coming up, and to agree with them quickly means, you know, to own them quickly. To agree with them is to, okay, I'm not going to project them out. You know, I'm not going to go into the blame game. I'm not going to project it onto whoever's nearest to me as to why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. I'm going to really own them so that I can be healed of them, and that's an agreement. That's an agreement. Oh yeah. These are mine. These are mine, and the only one that can do anything about it is me. And so once a person owns them and accepts them as theirs, then they can finally begin to do something about it that can actually change their life and transform how they show up and restore a sense of inner peace and a sense of lovingness and forgiveness. Balance is a very, very important aspect of our spiritual life. And the spiritual walk, it's an important quality. And life is about learning to balance the outer life with the inner, as we said. In the outer life, we're basically pulled into a lot of doingness. Okay? That's the outer life. The inner life is where we're really called to be living from beingness. The difference between doing and beingness. Being connected to your source, being connected to wisdom, being connected to love, unconditional love, being connected to the truth, your source of all of that. So it's very easy to get out of balance, to get lost in the demands of doing at the expense of being. That's something that is very easy for us as we walk the path of life itself. And so when we are doing, have you ever noticed that it seems like really all doing, usually much of it or most of it has to do with being in our heads. We're thinking how to do, when to do, where to do, all there is to do, and we get stressed and we get sideways. We can, which causes us to be more irritable or potentially reactive. And when we are in being, or being one with the source, we're really more inclined to be in our hearts, and we're softer, we're gentler, we're more flexible, we're more pliable, we're more understanding, we're more patient, all of those things, and less likely to go into, attack mode out of anger. And so this also means, too, the idea of balance. Balance, it means, in terms of your inner work, it's balancing what you know in your head with what you want to have as a beingness, as an experience of what you know. So you may know the spiritual practices, you may know these various things, you may hear about love, joy, and peace, but you have to balance what you know with your being, bringing into actually being that, experiencing that, being an expression of that vibration of what God is. And so that requires usually, a person to spend time in the quiet, in the silence, time in meditation and reflection, getting to know more about yourself, understand yourself, own more, and then also you're getting to know God. The more you know yourself, the more you know God. The more you know God, the more you're going to know yourself. That's why they said, know thyself. Okay? Because at the root, beyond it all, you will find something in you that is so sacred and so pure and so holy. That's who you really are. It's just all been covered over. And that's why they say it's so important to get to know you in the process of your walk. And so we have to slow the mind down, and we have to, that part that is most about doing and can get us out of balance, we have to shift it away from so much of the busyness and back into an awareness of the presence and quieting the ego mind and experiencing once again a sense of love and peace. If we are consciously connected to the source of peace and love from within, then some of that connectedness to that source is going to spill over and flow into whatever it is we're doing. And so what we're doing has a different energy, because we have spent the time and made it important to be a balanced being in our beingness. You understand? And so when people say, I was lost, but now I'm found, forgive me, what that means for me really is I was lost, meaning I was out of balance. Okay? I was lost in my head. I was lost in doing. I was lost in busyness. But now I'm found. And that means I have returned to the present moment now, which is the only place that I or anyone could ever find God, is returning back to the moment. Not living in the future, not worried about the past, but getting back into the moment and taking those sacred times to return to one's heart. It's being present in the now that you find the presence of the divine. And so when we come back to being in the present, with the presence, it helps us to move into what we would call acceptance. We become more accepting of what is. You know, we understand that there are imperfections in the world, there are imperfections in people and all of that, and that, you know, it doesn't mean that, of course, that problems go away and challenges. If you're going to live in the world, there's going to be tribulation going on inside of people and in the world itself, and you're going to have to know that. But we won't paint the person or the situation or the circumstance necessarily as our foe anymore, you know. We won't see it as something that opposes us or has the power to take away our happiness or who we are. We'll see it as a learning opportunity to be balanced and to be balanced in living in this world, and thereby making a contribution through the healings that are taking place in us, whereby we get to a healthy kind of acceptance of the people around us and the world around us. And it doesn't mean that in accepting it, we have given up on it improving or transforming. But you have to start with accepting what is, and at that moment, you can begin to make things new and better. But if you're fighting what is, you never get to making something better. You're fighting what is, and all your energy is there. So it's the acceptance that says, you know, the world is going to have those people and situations push my buttons and bring up my stuff. And so I'm not going to go out of balance in that I'm not attached to having to have everything and everyone be the way I want them to be, when I want them to be. You get what I'm saying? And sometimes we slip into that. We want this person to be this way. We want that person to be that way. We want this in our life to be this way and that. Why isn't it? And we're attached. We're attached to having it our way. And so there's a certain element of a balance that needs to be more in acceptance of what is, and then going from there, you know. And so realize that even when things seem to be going bad, it may have a gift in it. You know, and I know we've heard that before. You know, we're always being steered forward by the universe, okay? And even when things look like they're heading south, we really still may be heading north. And we don't know until we've gone through the experience and we're looking back. Even though it was painful and difficult, we look back and see the value gained. We see how it stretched us, how we found dimensions of ourselves that we would never have found otherwise if we hadn't gone through this difficult time. And so all that we are being asked to do basically in this path of growth is to be sensitive to a higher power, the divine intelligence that is helping to hold our hand, give us opportunities to learn and grow, to follow that guidance that comes up, to look and listen. There's a deep listening, and you will find that there is help even in unlikely places and in unlikely dimensions of our life. Even if some ass starts talking to you. Even if some ass starts talking to you. Now, I know that sounds irreverent, but actually I'm drawing from a story in the book of Numbers in the Old Testament. You can look it up in chapter 22. There is a story about a talking ass. And it really fits some of what we're talking about here today. You know, I'm not being irreverent. The King James translation is said by scholars to have the least amount of errors. You know, everything is a translation of a translation of a translation. And so scholars have said that the King James Version has the least errors or mistranslations. So I'm going to, and it uses the word ass. As opposed to donkey. We all know it's a donkey, okay? But we'll see as we go along how much I say ass and how much I say donkey. Anyway, we are talking about a donkey here. I want to share this story, and some of you may be familiar with it, but it's a story about a guy named Balaam, and he was summoned by the king of Moab. The king of Moab was Balak, B-A-L-A-K. And Balak asked Balaam to put a curse on the tribes of Israel so he could defeat them. Balaam was not an Israelite, he was a Mesopotamian, and he was somehow known for his ability to, through the power of the spoken word and divination, he was able to place both curses or blessings wherever he directed it. And so this came to be known about him. The king sent elders and princes to go along with payment in hand for Balaam to curse the tribes of Israel. And Balaam's response to the king was, no, hold on, let me go check with my God and see what he's telling me to do. So he went and checked, and Balaam was told by God not to go do this, not to place a curse. Well, then this was taken back, the word to the king of Moab, and he upped the ante. And so there were a few things added, as well as promising great honors and so forth. And Balaam says, hang on, let me check with my God. So he goes back and checks with God. And now God waffles a bit, only in the sense that I think God is saying, this will be a good experience for you. I'm telling you to go, but follow God's guidance every step of the way. And as the scripture says, do as I bid you to do. Okay, so it's very firm, very close. So go on this path, go on this journey, but I'm going to be with you. You will listen. And so Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his ass. And he went on this journey. And this is where it gets very, very interesting, this story, because God sends an angel along with him. But Balaam can't see the angel. But his ass, his donkey, can. All right? So he's riding along, and his donkey's ass sees this angel standing in the road and is holding a sword. And so the ass turns aside and goes off into a field. Balaam can't see it, and he's getting really angry at this animal and strikes it, and tries to get it back on the path. So it's heading down the path some more, and it's traveling along, and it comes to, there's some vineyards on each side, and they have walls that are about 8 foot on each side, and the pathway goes down through it. It's fairly wide, for things to pass, but he sees the angel, the ass does. And again, he's concerned, and so he veers around and bumps up against the wall, hits Balaam's foot, gets bruised or bumped or whatever, and Balaam has no idea why he's veered off to the side. There wasn't anything he saw in the way, and he again gets angry and strikes the ass and the animal. And then it travels down along the path some more, and this time they come to a place in the path where it is so narrow, there is only room for them to pass through. There's no room on either side, and there is the angel with the sword held high. The ass sees that, and so it decides to just stop and lay down with Balaam on. Well, Balaam got really hot. What is this animal doing? And he strikes him with its staff. And in that moment, after the third strike, the Lord gave the ass the ability to speak. This is the story, okay? Keep in mind that there's always undergirded with truth and messages for spiritual living. So now the ass turns around and speaks to him and says, as maybe some of you have said, "What have I ever done to you?" That was his words. Look it up in the scripture. "What have I ever done to you that you would have struck me like this 3 times?" And Balaam probably was pretty surprised that this donkey all of a sudden started talking to him. But he reflected on it, and he said, "Because you've abused me," he said. "And if I had a sword in my hands right now," he was really mad, "I would kill you." And then the ass reasons with him. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, "In all the days that you've ridden me, have I ever once been disrespectful? Have I ever once failed to do my job? Have I ever once been disloyal?" And Balaam thinks about it and says, No. He speaks the truth. And in the next moment, Balaam's eyes are opened, having spoken the truth. And he sees an angel standing there holding the sword, blocking the path. And the angel told Balaam that his behavior and out of bounds anger in striking the ass 3 times was perverse. That's the word, perverse. And that you get in the story that The donkey didn't know what to do other than to protect its master. Balaam couldn't see it. And so the angel then repeats to Balaam to go forward on the path, but to follow every bit of God's guidance. So the story begs the question, who was really the ass in the story? It was Balaam that was making an ass of himself. We have to face that. By getting angry at things that were meant to help him as he traveled the path, he was striking out at it, blaming whatever he could find to blame. When all along he couldn't see that this all was really in his best interest. And it was only after he actually entered into dialogue with the donkey, the animal, which symbolizes there was a coming to a place of owning his part. Owning the fact that he had unfairly judged what was happening before him, and he was willing to reflect on that, think about that, open to questioning himself, questioning his anger, his reactions. Only then did his eyes get opened. Agree with thy adversary quickly is basically asking the question to do that sooner rather than later.